Emily could feel the weight of Brandon's eyes on her every time they were around his mother. What started as small remarks about the way she cooked or dressed soon became something she couldn't ignore. At first, she tried to shrug it off, thinking he didn't mean to hurt her, but the words stung more every time. During family dinners, Brandon would make jokes at her expense, laughing along with his mother while she sat there, embarrassed and silent. She had never imagined her husband could treat her this way, the woman who had given him years of love and support. She started noticing how his attention always leaned toward his mother, how he valued her opinion over his own wife's feelings. It was in the little things, her suggestions ignored, her efforts minimized, her feelings dismissed. Emily tried to talk to him, hoping he would see how unfair he was being, but every conversation ended with excuses or anger directed at her. She felt trapped, caught between the man she loved and the constant pressure of his mother's expectations. One evening, after another cutting comment at a family gathering, Emily felt a spark of clarity. She realized she didn't have to stay in a place where she was constantly belittled. She didn't need his approval or his mother's validation to know her worth. For the first time, she thought about what life would be like if she prioritized herself instead of trying to meet someone else's impossible standards. Emily began to pay closer attention to her own needs. She quietly focused on her career, saving her money, and finding moments of peace away from Brandon's criticism. She learned to stand a little taller, speak a little louder, and remind herself that she deserved respect. The humiliation she had endured had lit a fire inside her. It wasn't just about being treated fairly anymore, it was about taking back control of her life, setting boundaries, and reclaiming the dignity she had been denied. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was enough. Every small step she took away from his judgment and his mother's interference strengthened her. Emily realized that true power wasn't about fighting or arguing, it was about rising quietly, confidently, and refusing to let anyone else define her worth. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. During another family dinner, Brandon made a comment that cut deeper than usual. He compared her to his late wife, saying she would have handled things better, done things the right way, just like his mother expected. His words weren't just unfair, they were cruel. Emily tried to smile, tried to laugh it off, but inside, she felt herself shrinking. How could someone you loved make you feel so small in front of others? She began replaying the moments in her head. Every little criticism, every sigh or rolled eye from Brandon now felt heavier. She wondered if love was really enough in a marriage if respect could be so easily forgotten. Emily had given her all, her time, her care, her energy, but it seemed invisible. Nothing she did was ever good enough. She felt trapped, not because she couldn't leave, but because she couldn't understand how someone she loved could betray her like this. Even at home, Brandon's words lingered. He wasn't kind, and the way he prioritized his mother's approval over her feelings made Emily feel invisible. She started doubting herself, asking if she was too sensitive or overreacting, but deep down, she knew this wasn't about her, it was about him. It was about his need to control, to prove that he was always right, and that his mother's opinion mattered more than her heart. Emily tried to speak up once, telling him how hurtful his words were, but he dismissed her. He told her she was overthinking, that she should take it lightly, as if her feelings didn't matter. That dismissal broke something inside her. She realized that in this marriage, she had no voice. She felt silenced, stuck in a cycle where every attempt to defend herself only gave him more control. The betrayal wasn't just the words, it was the realization that the person she loved most could compare her to someone else, putting his mother's expectations above her dignity. It was a quiet pain, one that gnawed at her every day, but also a spark. Emily started to see that if she wanted to survive this, she had to find her own strength, even if it meant standing alone against the man she once trusted. Emily felt herself fading. Each day, Brandon's words and his mother's constant interference chipped away at her confidence. She no longer felt sure of herself, even in simple things. Small mistakes that used to feel normal now made her anxious, afraid of what he might say. She began doubting her own decisions, wondering if she was truly capable or if she would always fall short in his eyes. At night, when the house was quiet, Emily would cry. The tears weren't loud, but they carried the weight of months of being undervalued and dismissed. She questioned herself constantly, asking why she had stayed so long, why she had believed that love alone could protect her from hurt. She wondered if she even deserved to be treated with respect, or if she was meant to live under someone else's control. Her friends noticed the change. Emily, who used to be cheerful and full of energy, now seemed distant. Her smiles were forced, and laughter rarely came. She avoided social gatherings when she could, worried that someone might notice the sadness hiding behind her eyes. They asked her what was wrong, but she could barely put it into words. She felt trapped in a life where her emotions didn't seem to matter, where her value was measured only by how well she followed Brandon's and his mother's expectations. Meanwhile, Brandon continued as if nothing had changed. He insisted that his mother's wishes were more important than Emily's feelings. He criticized her choices, ignored her successes, and treated her kindness as weakness. Every attempt she made to express herself was met with dismissal or anger. He didn't see her pain, he didn't care. His focus was on keeping the approval of his mother and maintaining control over Emily. The emotional toll was heavy. Emily felt like she was living someone else's life, one where her worth didn't exist. But beneath the sadness, a quiet strength began to stir. Though she didn't realize it yet, each moment of pain was slowly teaching her that she couldn't rely on anyone else to fight for her. She would have to find her own courage, even if it meant standing up to the person she once trusted the most. That evening was like any other, but something felt different to Emily. They were at a small family gathering when Brandon pointed out a minor mistake she had made in front of his mother. His voice was sharp, filled with criticism, and his mother nodded, approving his words. Emily felt every eye on her, weighing her down. She could feel the humiliation rising, burning inside her chest, and for a moment, she just froze. Then, something inside her changed. She realized she had been bending herself, giving up pieces of who she was, all for a man who clearly valued his mother's opinion more than her feelings. Every insult, every sigh, every dismissive look had built up, and suddenly it hit her that she didn't have to accept it anymore. She had been sacrificing herself, her dignity, and her happiness for someone who could not see her worth. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She knew that staying silent had only allowed Brandon's behavior to continue. She wanted respect, not favors, not praise, not apologies, just the simple respect that every person deserves in a relationship. She remembered all the nights she had cried alone, all the moments she had doubted herself because of his words, and she understood that this had to end. From that moment, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She would no longer let Brandon's need for approval from his mother dictate her life. She would stand up for herself, even if it meant challenging him directly. She began to see that respect was not something to wait for, it was something she could claim, starting with herself. The shame she had carried for so long started to shift. It was replaced by clarity, a quiet strength that had been hidden beneath months of pain. Emily felt a sense of control returning. She didn't yet know exactly what steps she would take, but she knew she would no longer allow herself to be humiliated. From that night on, something had changed inside her. She was ready to protect her heart and reclaim her life, no matter the cost. After that night, Emily changed how she reacted to Brandon. She stopped arguing, stopped defending herself against his constant criticism. Instead of letting his words hurt her openly, she stayed calm and quiet, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She realized that his power over her had been in how much she let him affect her, and now she was taking that power back. Emily began keeping track of everything, every insult, every public humiliation, every time he put her down in front of his mother. She wrote it all down, not out of revenge yet, but to understand the pattern and protect herself. Seeing it on paper made it clear how unfairly she had been treated and helped her see how much she had endured without standing up for herself. At the same time, Emily focused on her own life. She quietly saved money, organized her personal affairs, and thought about ways to make herself independent. She didn't tell Brandon about any of it. He still believed she was the same submissive wife who would tolerate anything for his approval. But he began to notice subtle changes. Emily was no longer flustered by his insults, no longer eager to please him or seek his validation. She walked a little taller, spoke a little firmer, and spent more time focusing on her own goals instead of constantly trying to appease him and his mother. Brandon grew frustrated and confused. He didn't understand why his usual tactics no longer worked. His attempts to provoke her were met with calm silence or polite disengagement. Emily felt a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't angry or plotting yet, she was preparing. She knew that protecting herself emotionally and financially was the first step toward reclaiming control of her life. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of security in knowing that she didn't need anyone else to determine her worth. Brandon's frustration only reminded her that she was no longer under his control. For the first time, Emily felt strong in her quiet rebellion. She didn't need to shout or fight to win, she was already taking her power back, step by step, planning for a future where she could finally live for herself. Emily started using her own growth as a quiet way to challenge Brandon without him even realizing it. She poured her energy into her work, taking on important projects that pushed her skills and confidence. Every success reminded her that she didn't need his approval to feel accomplished. Her coworkers began noticing her dedication, praising her for her hard work and reliability. For the first time in years, Emily felt recognized for who she was, not just as Brandon's wife. Outside of work, Emily built a circle of friends and mentors who encouraged her. She spent more time with people who respected her and lifted her up, people who reminded her that her value wasn't tied to Brandon's opinions or his mother's judgment. She realized that having a support system was just as important as financial independence. Slowly, she began feeling more secure, more confident in her own decisions. Brandon, meanwhile, remained blind to the changes. He still acted entitled, expecting Emily to cater to his needs and to follow his mother's guidance. He noticed her calm demeanor and independence but didn't understand the source. He assumed she was still the same submissive wife, but his assumptions were wrong. Emily's growth was quiet but unstoppable. As she gained confidence, Emily also learned to use Brandon's arrogance against him. She spoke up in small ways, making decisions without seeking his input, handling situations he would normally criticize, and showing competence in areas he thought he controlled. Each time he tried to assert dominance, she calmly demonstrated that she was capable and self-reliant. He grew frustrated, confused, and a little unsettled, sensing that things were shifting but not knowing how to stop it. Emily didn't need to rush or act impulsively. She was planting the seeds of her own independence, quietly creating a life where she could thrive without being diminished. Every small victory, every step she took toward self-reliance, was also a silent lesson to Brandon. The woman he tried to control was no longer under his command. She was rising, stronger and smarter, and soon he would see just how unstoppable she had become. The day of the family gathering, Emily felt a mix of nerves and determination. She knew this was the moment to speak up, not with anger, but with calm strength. As everyone settled around the table, Brandon began his usual comments, trying to assert control, but Emily didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and met his eyes steadily. "Brandon," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I need to tell you something. The way you've treated me, criticizing me, humiliating me in front of others, letting your mother's opinion decide my worth, it has hurt me deeply. I can't keep staying silent while this continues." The room went quiet. His mother's eyes widened, and Brandon froze, unprepared for this side of Emily. For months, he had seen her quiet, compliant, and timid. Now, she was standing tall, composed, and unapologetic. Every word she spoke carried weight and truth. Emily continued, explaining how his constant belittling had affected her confidence, her peace of mind, and her happiness. She didn't raise her voice, didn't insult him, but she made it clear that his actions were unacceptable. She spoke about her own growth, the steps she had taken to protect herself, and the realization that she deserved respect, not just words, but genuine recognition of her worth. Brandon tried to interrupt, to defend himself, but Emily held firm. She calmly responded to every excuse, every attempt to minimize her pain, without losing her composure. It was the first time he had been truly challenged in front of his mother, and neither of them knew how to react. By the time Emily finished, there was a stillness in the room. Her presence, her calm confidence, and her unwavering voice left Brandon speechless. His mother, who had always believed she controlled Emily through praise and approval, realized that her influence was gone. Emily was no longer the timid wife they had tried to manipulate. She was a woman who knew her value and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. For Emily, the confrontation wasn't about revenge, it was about claiming her dignity. She had finally shown that she would no longer be silenced or humiliated. In that quiet moment, she felt the power of her own voice, a power that Brandon and his mother could no longer ignore. After the confrontation, Emily decided it was time to reveal something Brandon never expected. Calmly, she told him and his mother that she had been quietly preparing for her own independence. She had saved money, invested carefully, and secured her own assets over the past months. Every step she had taken was to ensure that she could live on her own, free from humiliation and control. Brandon's eyes widened as he realized what she was saying. For years, he had assumed Emily would always depend on him, that she would stay in the shadow of his expectations and his mother's influence. He had never imagined she could build a life without him, and now the truth hit him like a shock. His cruelty, his constant belittling, and his obsession with his mother's approval had fueled her determination to become strong and self-reliant. Emily explained that this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong for the sake of it. It was about survival, dignity, and self-respect. She had learned that relying on someone who dismissed her worth was dangerous. Every insult, every comparison to his late wife, every moment of public humiliation had pushed her to take control of her own life. Now she had the freedom to choose her path, and Brandon no longer had any power over her. His mother, who had always believed she could influence Emily, looked stunned. She had praised Brandon for controlling his wife, for keeping her in line, but now it was clear that her approval had no effect. Emily had grown stronger precisely because of their attempts to control her. Brandon tried to speak, but Emily stopped him politely yet firmly. She didn't need to argue. The proof was in her independence, in the confidence in her voice, and in the life she had quietly built without anyone noticing. For Emily, the shocking revelation wasn't just about money, it was about freedom. She was finally in a position to walk away from humiliation, from a husband who didn't respect her, and from a family dynamic that had kept her small. Brandon had been blinded by entitlement, and now he saw too late that the woman he underestimated had become unstoppable. Emily had taken the first steps toward her new life, and now it was time to fully claim it. She moved into her own apartment, a space that belonged entirely to her. For the first time in years, she felt the freedom to make her own decisions without fear of judgment or criticism. Every detail, from the way she arranged her furniture to the small routines she created, reminded her that she was no longer living under someone else's rules. Brandon tried to regain control. He called, texted, and even stopped by unexpectedly, expecting her to return to the wife he had always demanded she be. But Emily stayed firm. She didn't respond with anger or confrontation, she simply refused to step back into the role that had kept her small and silenced. Her calm confidence and independence left him frustrated and powerless. At work, Emily celebrated her first big solo achievement since reclaiming her independence. A project she had led successfully brought recognition and praise from her colleagues and superiors. It was more than professional success, it was proof that she could thrive on her own, that she didn't need Brandon's approval or anyone else's validation. Each small victory reinforced her confidence and reminded her of how far she had come. Brandon's mother, who had once tried to control every aspect of Emily's life, was left stunned. Her attempts to manipulate or influence Emily now had no effect. The woman she had tried to keep in line was gone. In her place was someone strong, self-assured, and fully capable of standing alone. Emily didn't need anyone else to define her worth, she was in charge of her own life. Emily felt a deep sense of empowerment. For the first time, she understood what it truly meant to be free, not just financially or physically, but emotionally. She no longer worried about Brandon's approval, his criticism, or his mother's influence. She had taken control of her own life, and every step forward was a victory. This independence was more than a change in her living situation, it was a reclaiming of her dignity, her voice, and her power. Emily had survived humiliation, betrayal, and control, and now she was thriving. She had proven to herself that strength, courage, and self-respect could overcome even the most toxic of relationships. Emily looked back on everything she had been through and realized how far she had come. Leaving Brandon wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about reclaiming her life. She had endured humiliation, constant criticism, and the control of both her husband and his mother, but she didn't allow those experiences to define her. Instead, she used them to grow stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. She understood that staying silent or trying to please someone who didn't value her would never bring happiness. Respect and dignity weren't things to beg for, they were things she had to demand for herself. Every choice she made now, every step toward independence, reinforced her sense of self-worth. Emily felt lighter, freer, and more confident than she had in years. The fear and doubt that once held her back were replaced by clarity and inner strength. Brandon, on the other hand, felt the weight of his own mistakes. For years, he had tried to control her, to keep her in a role that suited his comfort and his mother's expectations. Now, he realized that manipulation and entitlement could not hold someone who had found her own voice. His attempts to dominate her ended in failure, and the shock of seeing her thrive without him was undeniable. He felt powerless, finally understanding that respect cannot be forced, and love cannot exist without it. Emily's journey became more than a personal victory, it became a lesson in resilience. She proved that betrayal and mistreatment can break your heart, but they do not have to break your spirit. Her life after leaving Brandon showed that courage, self-respect, and determination could transform pain into power. She was no longer defined by the humiliation she had suffered, but by the strength she had discovered within herself. The freedom Emily now felt was priceless. She had control over her emotions, her choices, and her future. Every morning, she woke with confidence, knowing that she had faced adversity, stood up for herself, and walked away on her own terms. Her story became a testament to anyone who had ever felt trapped. Betrayal may hurt, but self-respect builds unshakable strength that no one can take away.